You got it. Oh, there it is. Alright, and then some cute stories of the week, or not cute, but it was just like stories of the week period. I don't know if you guys see any of your stories on here, but yeah, I don't know, anyone want to share something? If it's yours, honor code thing?
During Honey and I shift, it was at 8 p.m. to midnight, and honor code announcement came, and I didn't know what it was, but Honey had experienced it already. And so for those who don't know, it's when a patient is gonna donate all their organs, right? It's gonna donate their organs. And so any provider that can go to the hallway and like will stand like on the hallway just to honor them for doing such thing and stuff. And so it was really cool, also really sad. So, but honestly, it was a really unique experience. So, and there was a lot of MRSA patients during that shift, so I was really scared.
Oh gosh, well, I'm glad you guys got to experience on the thing, but yeah, I guess it's just a reminder of like how many like, things go on, like how much. I'm glad everyone's has been having experiences. Okay. Okay, so just some general announcements. So some applications are opening up. They're due next Sunday at 11 p.m. as usual. So this will be unhoused. So that's the one that IQ and Coven are currently doing. And then PE PESI. So that's like an ultrasound one. So that one. So that one's an ultrasound one that you guys can apply to. Okay, and then some more application timeline updates. There is no more STEMI. We apologize. We like recontacted the original liaison, and then we decided that there was no need for any more like STEMI liaisons. So that one's not happening anymore. But there are still more liaison shifts to come, which we will show. And then so next week's meeting will be at Plumwood, and we'll just have like a journal club, which we'll talk about a little bit. Should be super fun, super chill. And then number 4, so we just wanted to give a gentle, friendly reminder for HIPAA. So HIPAA basically, well, the whole point of HIPAA in the emergency department is to protect a patient's confidentiality, right? So this includes when, I know there's a lot of interesting things that might come in, like traumas, and for example, if you guys get to go up and see surgeries and everything, but please remember that our phones should not be out during this time to like take pictures or like ask for pictures of any kind, right? We want to respect the patient's privacy and everything. This goes for like all situations. I know that it's tempting to kind of just like oh, this is so interesting. Like I want to take a picture of this and show my mom later or something. But I think as a student, especially, I think we're still in a part of our lives where just get to, right? So we just want to be respectful of that environment. Any questions? We're all good? Okay, so for journal club next week, this is pretty exciting. We haven't done it before. But we will organize everyone into groups of 5 or 6 for next week, and then we'll make a Slack group chat with everybody. And then you guys get to choose like your preferred paper or just like any paper that you want. Or if you guys don't choose it by this Friday, then we will assign one to you. And then they should also be related to just emergency medicine in general. So whatever you guys find interesting. And then next week at journal club, then we'll just have like kind of like sit arounds where we'll share like what our journals were about. We'll have like some snacks and stuff, and it'll be okay. And then if you guys want to take a picture of this is also the these are the studies that we're going to be releasing for the next couple of weeks. So like I said, next week is going to be unhoused and PE-PESI. Week 7 is going to be Asperdo. Week 8 is going to be ESPD and wrist fracture. And then week 9 and 10 are still kind of free to release any leaves on shifts. So go ahead, get proactive, get creative on these. These are really some of the most interesting studies. So if you guys want to get ahead and start. Okay. This is really exciting. So we're going to announce the liaison ship for naltrexone. So if you get around, or Congratulations. Okay, congratulations. Look forward to seeing what the with ideation on how this will. Oh my goodness. Who the heck?
Just another note was we had a couple of birthdays this past July. Of course, TD Mitch. So can we do a quick happy birthday on three? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Yo, I need some gusto to this, guys. Tyler Johnson. Happy birthday to you.
Thanks, guys. But I did not know this slide was gonna be up here like at all. This is so cute. Who made this? I did. Aw, this is so cute. Thanks, much. Okay. Also, social board, did you have any updates about
No updates. It's going to be this Friday though, still.
Veterans, please fill out the form.
Yes.
We're still missing people. Yeah.
You want to resend that form out to the chat again?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
I'll be hosting a beach volleyball session for those wanting to learn. So yeah, bring a lot of balls.
Oh, yeah, Marco's been like doing volleyball for a long time.
Wow, pop out, guys.
Okay, any general numbers and study updates? Yes.
So a couple questions regarding food insecurity have come up. Screen means that you did the first 2 questions with them, so you literally screened them. Approach means that you actually approach them for the second part. Then enrolled means you finished the second part. So if say you screened them, just did the first 2 questions, but they said no to both questions, it's not an approach. So just for those tracking numbers and those who are curious. Yeah, just want to clarify that. Also had an awesome meeting with So and Shri. Is it awesome, guys? Good. Yeah, we had an awesome meeting. So we have a couple plans for the year.
Good. Okay, perfect. All right, any other study updates? All right, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kristen Lewis with Women in Medicine.
Good. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Lewis, and I haven't met you. I'm one of the emergency medicine doctors in the emergency department here at UCI. So I'm going to be talking to you pretty much a lot of different topics, kind of like a hodgepodge of what it's like to be a woman in medicine in general. So these are just some of the topics that we're going to talk about. A lot of these really could be like lectures in and of themselves. So I'm just going to give kind of a broad overview. Can't really go into a lot of detail with the vast majority of these. But if you have any interest or want to talk more, I'm very open and interested in these topics. So you can absolutely reach out to me. I'm more than happy to give my email address out. I also don't claim to be an expert in this area too. It's just kind of a passion area that I'm interested in. So if there's anything I can answer, I will look it up for you if you have questions. Okay, so traditionally, women have been very underrepresented in medicine. This has been a very male-dominated field for decades and decades, right? And actually, women were even excluded for much of the earlier parts of U.S. medicine. And really wasn't until like the 80s and 90s that women started to become more and more represented in medicine at all levels. But it was very slow, very incremental process. And even now, we're still underrepresented in many facets, but we'll kind of talk about that right now. And in 2019, this is kind of when we actually started to see a big shift. So this is the first time that in medical school, women actually had the majority of slots in matriculated medical students, which is really exciting. So 50.5% of medical students were women in 2019, and that's never happened before. Fun fact is that's the year that I graduated medical school. So I think that that's also a pretty cool statistic. But if you kind of look at the whole sort of gamut of medicine, right, in 2019, that's great that medical students themselves, over 50% of them were women, but what about in leadership positions? So you can see there's a big discrepancy here, right? So around this time, about department chairs, right? So the head of any sort of medical department, that only about 18% of those were department chairs were women. Of full professors of academic medicine, about 25%. So once you become, like a full-time doctor, right, you have different ranks in academia. You're an assistant professor, an associate professor, and a full professor, right? So at this time, full professors, only about 25% of them are women, and then only about 18% of deans of medical schools. So clearly there's a big discrepancy here as early, and this was not that long ago, right, in 2019. However, if you kind of take a step back outside of 2019, looking a little before, looking a little bit after over the past 2 decades, we've really seen significant growth, right? So if you're comparing 2004 to 2022, just looking at who is actually practicing medicine full-time, you see a 97% increase in women over this time, compared to 13% of male doctors. And then if you look at, just who was active in 2022, all of the active practicing full-time physicians in the United States, over a third of them were women, compared to about 26% 2 decades prior. And because of that, the percentage of men went down a little bit. So we are starting to build more and more representation in medicine, as that majority in 2019 is starting to matriculate actually into the workforce. Moving another year later in 2023, so some of these graduates are now starting to practice medicine, right? And then some of those that were practicing medicine are actually now starting to get leadership positions. Still a minority, but some progress, right? So with full-time faculty members in and of themselves, they're about almost 50% in 2023, almost. Department chairs were now at 25%. Full professors, right, that full top ranking is now 29%. And deans of medical schools, 27%. Still a minority, but progress, right? Slow, incremental, but steady progress, which is exciting. And so women are really changing the face of medicine, right? So if you kind of look at all the different specialties that you might be interested in, I know you all work a lot in the emergency department. Clearly, I'm an emergency medicine physician, so that's what I'm mostly interested in. But just looking across all different specialties, these are the top 20 specialties in terms of how many are represented in the overall workforce. So with these 20 specialties, this represents like 75% of all physicians that are practicing. And back in 2004, only one specialty had majority of women, and that was pediatrics. And then if you go back to fast forward to 2022, we also have not just pediatrics, but also OBGYN, dermatology now have majority of women. And again, women are still the minority in the rest of the specialties, but there is some growth. So we're making some progress in terms of our overall representation. And just a couple standouts too, if you look at like the percentage of growth within certain fields, like critical care, this is like exponential astronomical growth, right? Gastroenterology, urology, nephrology, and yay, emergency medicine. So a lot more representation for women. Just a shout out to surgeons, right? This is a historically particularly difficult field for women to be in. For a number of different reasons, and some of those we'll talk about today, but we are seeing more and more women represented in these surgical subspecialties too, like orthopedic surgery. We're still single digits. I think last I checked, we were like 6 to 9%. Neurosurgery, general surgery, some of these more surgical fields, women are slowly starting to get greater and greater representation in those fields as well. What I think is kind of interesting too is, why is that? Are women inferior compared to men? Are we equal? Are we better? Who knows? I would argue we're equal. There actually are some studies that say that perhaps even some patient outcomes are a little bit better. And why is that? There was a study done in 2017 that showed that female physicians actually are more likely to adhere to clinical guidelines and evidence-based practice compared to male physicians. This is mainly internal medicine doctors. And then another study in 2024 said, okay, well, let's replicate that. And they did, and they actually looked at patient outcomes and found that of elderly patients with who were being treated by internal medicine doctors who were women versus men, the ones who were treated by female doctors actually did a little bit better. Was it a huge difference? But it was a statistically significant difference. They had decreased mortality and decreased readmission rates. So you can definitely make the argument that female physicians are at least as good, and some even some studies say that perhaps even have a hand up. So in addition to adhering to clinical guidelines and evidence-based practice, some of the other explanations for this that the researchers are kind of throwing out is that maybe male physicians potentially could underestimate the severity of illnesses in their female patients sometimes. Female physicians potentially have better communication skills and more patient-centered approach with female patients. And the reason they're specifically looking at female patients is because that effect that they saw was actually more significant for female patients. So in other words, a female patient is going to do much better if they're treated by a female doctor compared to a male doctor. And actually, even if a male patient is treated by a female physician, there's still a hand up too. There's still an improvement. It's just not quite as significant as a female patient. And then another potential explanation is that, well, maybe females just like being treated by female doctors. They feel more comfortable talking to them about sensitive things. So these are just some potential explanations for those findings. Okay, so let's talk about some other topics that are not so positive. Pay. So there is a huge difference in pay when you look at gender or look at sex. There's many studies on this. There's a landmark one in 2012 that surveyed many physicians in the United States. And they found that if you compare or if you control for specialty, if you compare for rank, right, assistant, associate, full professor, if you control for how many years of experience that you've been in the field, if you control for how efficient you are and your productivity, if you control for all of those things, women still get paid less than men, have about 85 or like 75 to 85%, depending on a number of different measures. So still, if all things are equal, still being paid less. And that was in 2012. There are some newer studies that are saying we're making some progress, but in general, we are still making less than men across the board. Some of the reasons for this, maybe fewer leadership roles is one thought, less negotiation support. So there are some studies that say that maybe it's because we can't negotiate as well, or we don't feel comfortable negotiating salary, whereas men feel more comfortable negotiating. Unconscious bias, implicit bias plays a role here. And also another interesting one, this is a really active area of research, is that women are more likely to take on invisible labor. They're more likely to take on these tasks that don't really provide any monetary value, that you don't get compensated for, right? So women tend to be more, take on those roles of mentoring, of teaching more and more lectures, things that now actually like at UCI we get more credit for, but that's not true across all academic institutions. And so they're just kind of working more and taking all these extra opportunities that don't necessarily result in an increase in their income. Looking at how pay is distributed in terms of primary care versus specialty care, and then also men versus women. In general, kind of a general rule of thumb is primary care specialties don't get paid as much as specialty care. We've known that for a long time, right? Your surgeons, your specialty care, they're going to get paid more procedurally based specialties. But even if you take that out of the equation, again, women tend to make less than men. And so here, what you can see is in the middle, let me take a step back. So the primary care bars are the dark blue. The light blues are specialty care. The middle two, can you see my cursor here? Yeah, so these middle two bars here, right, this is men. The one over, these two bars over here are women. So if you look at specialty care, right, the light blue bars, men, this is the highest, right? So if you're basically a male surgeon, let's say, you're gonna make the most, right? A female surgeon is gonna be down here, right? That's a pretty big difference, it's the female surgeon. And if you look at primary care, which women actually have a little bit more representation in any ways, even then they actually still make a little bit less compared to men. And this is in 2022. Some progress, but there's definitely still this gap. And then if you take into account some other aspects, right? So let's say a Black woman, a woman of color, they kind of get this double whammy, right? So they have another aspect that tends to contribute to them making less. And so now Black women are actually paid across all professions, not just medicine, tend to be paid about 69 cents for every $1 that a white man has earned. I would say too that this is across the board in terms, like just generally speaking in the United States, there's a lot of institutional variability. So those institutions that are very transparent with their salaries, this is much less of an issue. So for example, UCI, you can like literally Google all of our salaries. It's much more transparent, so it takes kind of this away. But this is this is really kind of where medicine should be heading, I think is where UCI is. This is but just letting you know kind of where other, this is more traditional, what has been going on in other places where it's a little bit behind the scenes, behind the curtains of who gets promoted and what the salary is like. Okay, moving on to the next topic, microaggressions and by the way, stop me if you have any questions too. Have any questions so far? Okay. All right, so microaggressions, bias, talk a little bit about discrimination. So gender, race, ethnicity-based subtle snubs, slights, and insults. This is really what I'm talking about with microaggression. Are we familiar with what microaggressions are? You guys talk about it in your other classes? Yeah. Very common. It was actually coined a couple of decades ago. A lot of times they're nonverbal, but sometimes they can be verbal as well. Just as I'll give you a couple of personal examples, just being a woman in medicine. So I remember when I was in medical school, we all have to go through certain types of clinical rotations or what we call clerkships, right? So medical school, your first 2 years traditionally are quote unquote preclinical, a little bit more reminiscent of how college is, right? Being lecture-based, small group-based, a little bit of clinical exposure. Then you get into your third year and you get all these required clerkships or rotations, right? So I was on my surgery rotation in third year of medical school. And I started a little bit late in medical school. I started when I was 31 years old. Not that it should be anybody's business, but that's just what it was. So I was scrubbing into a surgery in the operating room, and the clerkship director, in other words, the person who decides my grade, asked me, he's like, oh, are you interested? And we're in a case, asked me if I'm interested in surgery. Being the good medical school student I was like, yes, of course, I'm interested in everything. Please like me. And his first inclination was he looked up at me and said, so you don't want kids? And I was like, no, I do. I want kids. It wasn't his business, but I was actually actively trying to have a kid at that same time. And he looked at me again and just said, well, you're kind of old, aren't you? So I took that like just quiet. I internalized that and didn't say anything more. Everybody kind of knew this one person was a bit blunt and inappropriate at times, but that's just one example in medical school. Very few and far between, to be honest, in medical school. I went to a wonderful medical school. It's just that was one particular experience. But fast forward to residency. I was in residency at University of Chicago during COVID pandemic. And just a little bit more maybe subtle examples would be with like nurses, right? So I would be friends with nurses, but also my male colleagues would be friends with nurses. And I would just notice that the nurses were much more likely to call my male co-residents of the exact same rank, Dr. So-and-so. And for me, it was just Kristen, which I don't mind, right? As long as we're all getting called by our first names, right? But that's just kind of another more like subtle example of a micro. I don't know if it was aggression, maybe a micro inequity would be a little bit more, right? I don't think that they were trying to like actively be aggressive toward me. They probably thought like, well, you're my friend, it's fine, or we're cool, or I don't know. But in any case, it was very, very common. And that was not just a me thing, that was kind of across the board, is that the female residents are much more likely to be called by their first name versus my male colleagues, Dr. So-and-so. Fast forwarding a little bit. So now let's say I'm not necessarily a medical student, I'm not a resident. Now I'm an attending, I'm supposed to be a grown-up doctor, right? Now I figure maybe I should start wearing a white coat because I often get, mistaken for being a nurse pretty frequently. And again, I don't think it's necessarily microaggression, just maybe a micro inequity, if you will, or just sort of this implicit unconscious bias of women are nurses, men are doctors, right? Very common with patients, but also common with like EMS, right? So for example, when EMS will come in, they'll bring in traumas, they'll bring in our ALS or sick patients. They kind of, we're in the trauma bay, they'll look around, kind of looking for like, is everybody here? Is the doctor here, right? Even now with my white coat that I hate wearing, but I wear it, so people know I'm the doctor. Even now, they'll just sit there and kind of wait for the doctor to come, right? Or they'll start giving report, and this is like a non-verbal example. They'll just kind of like look at my male medical student, and have kind of turned a little bit against me, right? Because it's just that implicit bias. So those are just some examples, right? And I'm not a very outspoken person, but I have noticed, especially with like listening to other people's stories, listening to these talks, it's just things that you sort of get accustomed to, like you get used to them every day, right? It's like, why am I going to cause a big deal out of this one little thing? I can just move on. But the point is that it happens like daily, you get accustomed to it, and then it's just sort of cumulative and kind of become burdensome down the road. Very well documented, this happens with women, even more so with women of color. Motherhood, unfortunately, is another really common reason, right? So there's a lot of stigma, there's bias with motherhood itself being a reason to have microaggressions, micro inequities toward you. So for example, like, especially within pregnancy, like there's a lot of complications that occur with working night shifts and being on your feet a lot. So being a pregnant doctor, you really want to like prove yourself and try to work even more to really prove that you're committed and working hard, right? But even then, like if you have to take a break or go to the bathroom or drink water, you can see some microaggressions occasionally with that, right? Just that like you're taking more breaks or you're going to go on vacation on your maternal leave, right? It's not vacation. So another reason to have is microaggressions. And again, women of color face unfortunately double jeopardy, both racism and sexism. So this is much more common with women of color in particular. And then this can actually be even to like full-blown harassment, unfortunately. This is like the more extreme version of this, the more explicit example of this, gender harassment, which includes sexual harassment. Even in this day and age, it's still common. It's not medicine specifically, right? It's in many fields, but medicine is one of those. And in a fairly recent survey done by the AAMC in 2024, that found that about 1 in 3 women were saying that they felt that they were at least a victim of gender harassment or sexual harassment. It tends to be much more common. There's large differences among specialties. It's much more common in like surgical specialties, anesthesiology, and unfortunately even in emergency medicine as well, tend to be the more common of those specialties. Because of some of these factors that we've already talked about, women tend to have higher rates of imposter syndrome. You've heard of this as well? Yeah. So imposter syndrome is this, I never even heard of this until I went to medical school. It's like, wow, that's me. I'm the queen of imposter syndrome. I am the imposter. And what imposter syndrome is, it's this like persistent doubt in your accomplishments and the fear of being exposed as a fraud. Like, I don't belong here, right? Like someone messed up and let me into this school and I don't belong here. Like everybody's smarter than me. I don't know how everybody does it. I'm studying all the time. They're not studying and yet they're doing better. Like, why am I here? Even when all the evidence proves otherwise. This tends to be much more common in high achieving underrepresented groups, particularly women. So underrepresented groups like women of color and women in general tend to be much more common with this. There's an interesting paper down here at the bottom, Harvard Business Review in 2021, not just explains imposter syndrome and how much more frequent it is with women and women of color, but has a really good take on it. It's basically saying, stop telling women they have imposter syndrome and making this individualized problem. Because really what we need to be addressing are like the systemic issues with this, right? Like we need to change the culture of it. We need to have mentors that look like us and can advocate for us. It's more of a systemic issue, not a personal individual issue. This is just us trying to make sense of our environment and why we're here. So any case, I have all my references listed at the end too. You guys are more than welcome to have my slides as well, but it's a really interesting article. I promise I get more positive later. Just being honest with a lot of these issues. Burnout. Heard of burnout? Yeah. Okay. So women have increased burnout for these reasons, right? So burnout, and this is a very hot topic of research right now, or has been over the past couple of years, especially in emergency medicine. And burnout is defined as sort of 3 things in general. So 1 is emotional exhaustion. Number 2 is increased cynicism and depersonalization. And then number 3 is like this feeling of diminished efficacy at your job. Like, it doesn't matter what I do, like nothing gets better. Really common in emergency medicine, unfortunately, but really common with women to exist burnout. So this paper in AMA, so this is a survey data that was published in 2023, based on a survey from 2022. And mind you, this is like maybe a year or 2 after COVID. So like burnout really increased right after COVID, the pandemic, and then started to kind of improve a bit. So, I mean, these are not insignificant numbers even for men, right? But women are increased across, they tend to be from year to year, higher rates of burnout. So why is that? In addition to things that we've already talked about the microaggressions, implicit bias, and just outright harassment at times, women physicians tend to spend more time with their patients. Women also tend to spend more time in the medical record systems. We know that with burnout, it's like a lot of this is like just so much documentation, right? So women tend to spend more time in the EMR, the electronic medical health system, compared to men. And then when they go home, they tend to have what's known as this like double shift phenomenon, right? So at home, all those things that you're not paid to do when you go home to like your real life, with your real life responsibilities, there tends to be this discrepancy of women. It's just implied that they're supposed to take on more housework, right? That sort of more traditional housework at home tends to fall on the women more so than men. So to sum up, women tend to work a lot more at their own job, right? Spending a lot more time on tasks that they don't get compensated for, spend a lot more time talking to their patients, and they go home and they have increased workload at home. So it's that combination of things that increases the risk of burnout. So not surprisingly, some women just outright leave medicine, which is pretty sad and depressing. This study that looked at in 2023 and 2024, but most of this data is mainly coming from 2023, the American Medical Association, 6-year attrition rate. So this is looking at 6 years after you finish training, after residency, how many are still practicing full time? And so if you look at no kids, right? So let's say you don't have any kids. Women, 23% of them left, right? It's a pretty significant number, 6 years after training compared to 4% of men. And then that gap widens with kids. So if you have kids at 6 years after training, with 31% leave women or leave medicine, full time compared to 5%. Hopefully I haven't totally discouraged you yet. I'm going to be a bummer for a couple more slides and then we'll get positive again, okay? Infertility. I know most of you probably are not thinking about this at all. I don't want to be ageist and assume that, but you guys, I'm assuming most of you are very young and this is something that's going to happen way in the future. But I think it's something to think about in the back of your mind, right? Because if you're going into medical training, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? You're going to be spending a lot of your reproductive years, your prime, in medicine. And so it's important to talk about these things and be aware of them. Infertility, it's higher, the rate is higher in medicine, right? So it's about double the rate compared to the general population. Much of the reason for this is because we're just waiting, right? Like, why do I want to have a kid when I'm in medical school or in residency when I'm working 80-hour shifts, right? Or 80 hours per week, right? I'm just going to do it afterwards when I'm more financially stable and I'm done with training. So part of this is because you're waiting and waiting, and that does account for the majority of the reason. But there's actually even a study that looked at, in Hungary, that looked at other demanding jobs like business executives, lawyers, also other people that tend to wait to try to have kids. And even then, when they compared physicians to them, they're starting around the same time that's delayed. Physicians still have a bit more of a higher rate of infertility. So there's something about being in medicine that, unfortunately, the infertility rate is higher. Many regret delaying having children, women. And then also they feel like there's this institutional lack of support for fertility treatments. And it can be very daunting, very expensive. These are actually medicine from my own personal stash from my IVF journey. Pregnancy. So let's say that you don't want to delay and you want to be pregnant, women, during your training. Residency is pretty challenging, and so it can be very physically taxing, right? And so not unsurprisingly, there are some increased complications of pregnancy, a little bit of an increased risk of miscarriage and some of these other pregnancy complications. The rate of those goes much higher up for like surgical specialties when you're standing in the operating room all day, right? Or you're taking a lot of night calls, flip-flopping back and forth, right? So there is definitely an association between like how much call shifts that you take per month, how much do you work overall, that is very directly tied to these complications. And of course, stigma and discrimination comes with this, right? Residents are already trying to work and prove themselves, and then with these microbiases, microaggression, it tends to be amplified in pregnancy. And then when you return back, there's a lot of institutional variability with your maternity leave and pumping and all of these fun things, even more stigma and discrimination, right? You just got back from maternity leave. You were on this vacation. Now you want to come back and like go off to take a break every 4 hours to pump. Like, what are you doing? You're lazy. Oh my God, it's the most challenging thing I've ever done. It's not, not a vacation. And again, I know you guys are probably in a very different life stage than me, just something to keep in the back of your mind. If you ever do want to talk about this more, this is very much an area I'm passionate about. I had my first kid in residency, my second baby in fellowship. I started trying medical school. It's a hard journey. When I graduated medical school in 2022, that was me and my 14-month-old, and I was pregnant with my IVF baby. This is 2 years later. Would do it all over again. it's challenging, but if anybody's interested in talking about this more, I'm an open book and I'll be very open and honest with you about pros and cons. Okay, last bit of like not so good news, and then we'll move on to how things are getting better for us, okay? Interesting article came out in 2025. So you probably have heard this, right? In general, women outlive men. Yeah, women live longer than men. And that's true in many, many studies. And they say that like a lot of different specialties, a lot of different occupations, it's true, women outlive men. But then this study comes out, published in JAMA in 2025, that says that's true unless you're a doctor. Women sort of lose this benefit, so to speak. You don't need to memorize this or make too much sense of this, but basically what this is saying, they plotted physicians against other healthcare providers that are not physicians, and then also against non-health occupations and stratified them by like low, middle, and high income. And then they compared healthcare workers to non-health workers matched for income. Does that make sense? So like a nurse is a healthcare profession, right? Then they matched that person to someone who's not in health who makes the same as a nurse. And they did so with a doctor, right? Makes more money, right? So they kind of tried to control for income as saying like maybe that's one of the reasons why people are living longer or not living as long as due to income and access to resources. So what they found was, here I'll show you this right here, is the physician line. So the darker the square, the higher the chance that you're going to like die from this cause, right? The lighter the square, the better chance you have to like, you're gonna live longer, right? So lighter is good in this scenario. As you can see, this whole column is lighter for physicians. That's good, right? Physicians, like we have income, we have access to healthcare, we know what we should be doing, right? So it just makes sense that we should overall be living longer. And that is true as a whole. But then when you look a little bit deeper into like subgroup analyses, right? And look at men versus women. And here, women are yellow, men are blue. You can see like physicians are over here, right? Overall, these are, and that the y-axis here, this is deaths, like number of deaths, right? So the lower the bar, the better, okay? So for physicians, it's overall lower compared to the rest. You can all appreciate that, yeah? So right here are the lawyers, the engineers, and the scientists, right? Your non-health professions, but make good money, right? High income workers, and then all workers. So physicians, again, or they live longer, right? Lower rate of death. But if you notice, right, in all of the other scenarios, the blue bar is higher. Yeah. So those are men who have higher rates of deaths than every other profession except for physicians. So we can interpret this as, yay, men, you caught up, or women, I don't know, like we do pretty well except as physicians when we're just sort of tapped out and we're taking care of everybody at home and I don't know. We can sort of speculate as to the reasons why. They didn't really go into the reasons why. It's an active area of research, but I found this just to be absolutely fascinating, right? Like we all have more than enough pay, we have access to good healthcare. We know what we should be doing. We have the education, right? So why, I don't know. It's interesting. So the AMWA, the American Medical Women's Association, are starting to look into this. Some of their pilot data, they're trying to kind of understand this. So the reasons that they're saying is, well, women, they get paid less when they're working the same roles. It leads to significantly higher rates of burnout. Burnout takes a toll on your physical health. Disproportionate home and caregiving responsibilities, even years and years into their careers. And experience, unfortunately, sexual harassment and gender-based microaggressions regularly. We just sort of internalize it and accept it as norm. And these stressors like wear you down over time. You're much more likely to have chronic illness, decreased resilience, not go to that extra, Orange Theory class I just signed up for. We're going to try to be much more consistent with that, right? But like if you're so burned out and you're taking care of everybody else at home, like you're like the last person that you're going to take care of, right? And then unfortunately, earlier mortality. Okay, so what needs to change? So these are the things that needs to change. And the good news is that things are changing. They're not changing as fast as we want them to, but they are changing. So we have to address harassment and discrimination. We have to go through like YES modules like all the time, every single year. We also have to engage like actively in workshops. There's like, for example, at UCI, the like MD2 movement. Anyways, we have to go through these things, right? So we go through training. That's one thing. Call it what it is. We also go through allyship training, right? So to call out people. So maybe if there's like this power dynamic, right? Like let's say that you see a medical student being harassed by an attending or someone that's perceived as a higher power. They're like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be graded badly or have any retaliation, right? So learning how to be an ally and to speak out for those people and how to do that in the right way so you also don't get retaliated against, right? Medical schools now have a lot of different avenues to report things. So like your ombudsperson. Here we have the Office of Diversity and Equity, right? There's a lot of different ways to report things anonymously. And then also like clerkship directors, residency program directors that are very, very like in tune now to hear these things. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But these rates are improving with training, with exposure, and with protection to actually come forward and address these things. Support work-life integration. This is something I'm particularly passionate about, right? Like you can't just put it all on women just to get pregnant, have a kid, come back immediately, bounce back, breastfeed, like do all of these things and not support them, right? So we need to have equitable, fair policies. And that is going to come with a culture change that comes with having women in leadership, right, who are outspoken and can actually implement this change. And it is happening. I'll talk about some examples in just a minute. Ensure mental health access, right? So burnout is real, but there's also a stigma with like asking for help, right? Nobody wants to have a psychiatric diagnosis on their record, right? It can affect your life insurance, capabilities, right? Or your disability insurance. Like there's all of these things, like these repercussions that we get worried about like asking for help, not even just our pride, but like logistic, like financial reasons that people are scared to reach out. So we need to make this much more the norm that like even like opting out rather than opting in, if that makes sense, to talk about some of these issues with how difficult medicine can be. As you mentioned, right? Like with Code Honor, right? This is like a day-to-day thing that we experience. We should all be able to feel comfortable talking about these emotionally taxing things that affect all of us, not just women. And then foster mentorship and community, right? Having mentors and coaches, people who will not just like say, hey, you're doing a good job, but will advocate for you, right? And actually listen to you and implement real change. I will say that my residency program, I could text my program leader any time of the day and things would actually happen in real time based on our feedback. Our emergency medicine program directors now and the APDs, we can text any of them at any point and they will like literally try to change things and make things happen. So it's nice to have people who listen, having women in leadership and actually trying to implement these changes and support you. Ever since like the 1980s, the AAMC publishes this state of women in academic medicine. You can literally just Google this and a lot of this is summed up here too. I'm talking about the different trends over the years and the progress. And I would say really within the past couple of years in particular, there's been a tremendous amount of progress. Up until this, it's been very slow, very incremental, slow, like stale pace. But I feel like within the past couple of years, things are actually really starting to move. There's a lot of women medicine health interest groups specifically that are very vocal and advocating for women in medicine. And we're actually seeing real change finally. Some of my final takeaways, I would say being a woman in medicine has several challenges, clearly, but many things are improving, especially over the past 5 to 10 years. We need women in medicine. We do. Like they belong in medicine at every specialty and every level of medicine. We need you. We need medicine because now that like the majority of medical students in 2019, right? I was one of those. We're starting to actually now work full-time in the active like physician workforce. And now we're actually starting to take place in leadership positions, right? We're much more vocal. We're much more like, hey, this really sucked for like my predecessor. It still kind of sucks for me. Let's make it suck less for the people, moving forward. So just some examples, right? Stanford is huge, right? So Stanford has like scheduling accommodations for women who are pregnant, no night shifts. They have like specific like scheduling accommodations for women when they're coming back from maternal leave. Even irrespective of like family planning, they have something called like a time buyback, I believe, to where they give you credit for doing certain things like mentoring and giving extra lectures that you can like bank that time and you can use it for like, hey, I want some help writing this grant for this research project. And they give you like funding for that. Or like, I don't have time to clean my house. And they'll use that money to like go clean your house, right? To decrease that burden load. So it just kind of helps to level the playing field for all of those tasks that you don't like immediately get compensated for. So There's some examples like that. UCI has amazing lactation support. They also, I just recently learned the residents, they have this thing called Carrot, where it's like over up to $30,000 of funding for fertility benefits. So maybe you're like, I don't want to have a kid in residency, but I want to like preserve my eggs that are nice and young and healthy now. They'll pay for that, right? So it's really kind of cool to have that benefit, which is huge. Harvard, Mass Gen. So they're doing it's called the fourth trimester initiative, right? And it's a multi-institutional endeavor right now where residents in particular, I think they're doing fellows too, they'll rent out something called the SNOO, it's a godsend with my second baby, to make them the baby sleep better. Mobile pumping, mentorship, and one other thing I'm forgetting, but they give them to them for free versus like the control group, right? Basically, like here's a $20 gift card, like get like Uber delivery or something, right? So and then they're comparing them and they're like filling out surveys to try to make this more of a norm to support, you know, parents coming back. So change is happening is my main point. So I'm optimistic. It's challenging, but I'm very optimistic. And I think it's because women are now starting to take place in leadership and in research roles. Would I choose this career? I would actually choose this career all over again. I didn't start medical school until I was 31 years old. As a very non-traditional, I thought I was going to be a neuroscientist and said, screw that, I hate this. I've worked in restaurants. I was a teacher for 6 years. I've done a lot of different things. And even though this is super challenging, I would still choose medicine all over again. And again, I'm very open and honest about the pros and cons, things I hate, things I love. So if you ever want to talk offline, I'm here. I'm also happy to answer questions. That's all I have. You ever want to dive deeper into that? Any questions?
Dave, get up.
Are you women like trying to, are you second guessing all your life decisions?
A little bit. Well, there were like a couple of moments where I was really shocked. I was like, I feel like sometimes you touch on it. It's like in our daily lives or like we experience things like as women. But I don't think I've ever like had a presentation where I think that just kind of everything that. Like from like the gender discrimination to like the microaggressions to like even how like the discrepancies between how much the black women get paid like instead of like there's like white people. Which I feel like something that a lot of people like kind of know about, but never take steps to kind of like learn about it or find out like what leadership want to kind of further these issues. So I don't know, are there any like current organizations that you think would be a great way for us to get involved as a male or like a female in order to push like gender like
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is yes, there is a I'll try to keep politics out of this, but DEI has been for quite a while now, like a very prominent thing within medicine. So we just use different verbiage for it. And DEI, this is included within DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is like under the umbrella of that. So the short answer is yes. Some of them you have to be a doctor, some of them you have to be a medical student, but some of them I think you should be interested in medicine. I would start with the AAMC. That's the same organization that you like apply to medical school through. So I would start there, but I'm sure there's other like undergrad organizations. This is still a very like, intensely active area of interest for many people. Yes. I will say too, because undoubtedly you've experienced it yourselves. Every woman here has. And then men too, like maybe you have experienced it as well. And you might be thinking like, what's the best way to like, just be not like stand up for him, right? You don't want to like come and swoop in or like mansplain something, right? Like, how can I be a good ally, right? That might come up, right? If you're like in the emergency department and you're seeing like someone being discriminated against, or you know, like how, like what's the next step? If you discriminated against, or somebody else has been discriminated in front of you, to make you uncomfortable. What do you think is like a good next step? What do you feel like is something that you can do in the moment, or even afterwards? It's okay if you don't know, it's uncomfortable. There's also a power dynamic too, right? Like it can make you like feel uncomfortable. I will say that, you know, some people feel very comfortable addressing it outright right in the moment. I'm not that kind of person, and but you do whatever feels right to you. I will say that you can always talk to, like one of us, any faculty member in particular, someone that you trust. You can also take some, let's say if it's not you, but someone else, to pull them aside, right? And say like, that was very weird. It made me feel uncomfortable. Like, how are you doing? Right? You don't need to say like, you must feel X, Y, and Z, right? You don't want to necessarily like impose your feelings onto somebody else, but you can talk about yourself all day long, right? So like that made me very uncomfortable. And if I was in that situation, I would feel, X, Y, and Z. So, and then maybe they're like, no, that's just how we are. Or, like, yeah, that didn't make me feel really uncomfortable, but I didn't want to say anything because this is my boss, or I just froze, or I don't know. So I think just even simply just acknowledging it like means the world to people. So even just that simple extra step, like that does more than you realize. And then to go that extra step further, it's like, okay, now who do I talk to about it, right? Without like your retaliation. And so that's just really knowing your resources. Find someone that you trust and just ask them. The resources are there. Okay, I will say at UCI, resources are here. They're everywhere. Like we're looking for it constantly. Does this stuff like this still happen? Yeah. But I'd say that we're very good at addressing it. But you have a lot of resources. Questions?
Who did you go for like help or for mentorship during your journey, like through medical school, residency, especially as like.
Yeah, that's a great question. I internalized everything. So I didn't actually go out and seek help. And I kind of like regret it on the back end, which is why I want to kind of pay it forward to be a little bit more vocal about some of these things. So for example, with that surgery clerkship director, I had my mask on and I just like felt like I was dying inside and like went home and just complained about it to my husband. I didn't say anything, to be honest. Could I have? Yeah, I absolutely could have. Like, and I went to UCSF. This wasn't actually didn't happen on UCSF. It was at the VA. So it was like an affiliate. And this person is just like, for being that way. So I could have easily said something and it would have just like added to like the collection. And would something changed immediately? Maybe, maybe not. But I could have absolutely talked to like my medical school career advisor. So that's one of my jobs here at UCI is a school medicine career advisor. And so everything, like I say, I talk with them can be confidential, or I can like connect them with resources. So I'm one potential person that they could come to. And so I will absolutely like report things on their behalf and make it so they can be honest. So now medical schools have career advisors and they're much more robust than they used to be. So that's always something. And then ombuds person as well. In residency, I did seek more mentorship, and it was more kind of like casual with my attendings, where I could just text them at any point in time and just ask them questions. And that's the beauty of emergency medicine, right? It's like any time of day, middle of the night. So it was mainly through my attendings that I found mentorship there. And then now with our medical education group here at UCI, so I'm on it first. I text like constantly, like my coworkers and my attendings, and even some of the residents too. So that's where I find mentorship. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Question. So you mentioned that, had kids during your residency and your fellowship. And I was wondering if you have any tips in terms of like finding that work-life balance. You're so busy.
I'm still looking for that myself, but I will say that there's never a good time to have them. It's like there's never going to be the perfect time. If I could have waited until after training, I would have, but I started later. I didn't start medical school until I was 31, and my husband is older than me. Like we knew that we wanted to try. So I would say certain things is like delegating tasks out. So I don't mind at all spending money on house cleaners and takeout and Instacart. Like I rarely shop myself anymore. Like I just don't. I know that's a very privileged thing to say, but now that I have like the income, like I do that, right? Because every minute, like I have to book things out like months in advance because of how hectic our schedule is, even especially in training too. So if you're able to afford it, delegate those things out with like house cleaning, Instacart, delivery, things like that. If you're blessed to be living near your family, use them big time. I didn't have any family nearby, so we used daycare and just worked our asses off for that. Those are the big things. Making sure that you schedule time with your significant other is huge, right? So let's say that you do have kids, they're like the biggest game changer of your life. everything's about them, but like a big thing I would say is like schedule time with your partner. That's where this all started anyways. And once we started doing that, our work, like our balance like got much, much better. And just knowing it's really hard and it's not always going to stay that hard. Things do get better, but reaching out, not being silent and suffering in silence, because there's a lot of people that want to help, they just don't know.
I have a question going back to the fertility thing. So just to clarify, you were saying that comparing of the same age medicine to, was it law and business? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, it's been a while since I looked at that study. It was done, maybe it was in Holland, where they looked at, I think they compared medicine to like business executives. I remember that specifically, but they looked at some other like demanding jobs as well.
Okay,
And,
got you.
yeah.
And just to clarify again, medicine had lower fertility compared to the obstetric. So bouncing off of that, then, so I don't know if you exactly know the answer to this, but like, what do you think, or do you know if that's due to like the like intensity and like stress of just medicine in general, like being in med school and all that kinds of things? I know like my aunt who's a nurse was telling me when I was like teenager, oh, you should like freeze your sperm because it's such a like stressful process, and it could benefit to fertility and stuff like that. So bouncing off that idea, I wanted to ask you if you had knowledge about that.
Yeah. Active area of research. Some thoughts are with the flipping the day-night schedules in particular are really challenging. I mean, you're not supposed to be working 24, 28-hour shifts, right? That's stupid. And then in emergency medicine, it's tough, right? Like we're constantly bouncing back. So part of it's sleep schedule. That's what like the main part of it is, in addition to just being like stressed out and then also like delaying. A lot of it is delaying it, but even if you control for that, we still have a higher infertility rate. In regards to like fertility preservation, people are becoming much more vocal about this, and I think that this is absolutely right. Like, I mean, I had no idea at medical school. I just remember literally, vividly remember this in my OBGYN block. It was literally of a picture of a woman standing over a cliff like this, and it said 35 years old, and then went down as if and that's your fertility. And went, wonderful, I turned 35 next year, this is great. But like we don't learn about that. It's not very vocal, right? And then it's it's important for men, but it's very important for women, right? Like 35 is really that sweet, like you need to like really be thinking about this. And I would say even earlier on, consider freezing eggs, which is expensive, and it's not covered. I do think it should be a benefit. Like I think it should be a covered benefit that all residency programs should provide. I'm not saying everybody wants to have kids. Oh my God, like they're the hardest things ever. But if you are even thinking about it, I would seriously consider freezing eggs in particular. And that should be something that we are like being more vocal about, increase awareness about, and provide coverage for.
Perfect answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do most academic institutions have unions that are formed amongst doctors? I know at UCI, there's a pretty strong nurses union, and they're pretty capable, at least at the legal aspect of things, for fighting on behalf of diversity and inclusion amongst nurses, kind of dipping out any sort of detrimental leadership or any sort of policy that's harmful to the workplace balance. Do academic doctors kind of face the same thing? I understand that the hospitals, they may have some sort of specialty group that allows them to kind of fight, sift out these workplaces. Do you guys kind of have something similar to this, or is it kind of like free for all, kind of just go to us direct?
There are definitely task force. So UCI is great. There's a lot of institutions that are like that too. Like Dr. Rivera leads up our DEI initiatives in particular. But yes, there's like designated officers and committees, in particular with DEI here. Residency unions, yes, we have a resident union here, which is phenomenal. Most places don't have a union. If you can find one with a union, that's excellent. Stanford, I believe, is, I think UCSF is, University of Chicago is talking about it. I think they actually have unionized recently. It's starting to become more of a thing. And if the residents are actually like creating unions, that's great. You can actually like have more fair work hours, better compensation, better coverage for things like fertility care, right? And then for like DEI, absolutely. Like I feel like every single residency program has like a specific DEI committee, if not like a union. And again, now because trying to dump a tangent, it's not a dirty word, but now since it's now considered this like stupid word, we're just using different verbiage for the exact same thing, right? Like, just call it equity and inclusion, or right here we call it inclusive excellence, right? So there's just different verbiage for it, but it absolutely exists.
The follow-up question, I know that a couple months ago, President Trump put out an executive order kind of admonishing the AAMC regarding their DEI policy. Do you actually think that this might hold weight for with medical school students, especially for our young classes that running maybe 3 to 4 cycles? Is this actually going to pose some sort of detriment to our chances? Is this something that we could fight at this pre-medical graduate level?
Good question. More questions than answers. I will say that the vast majority are not abiding by that, even though we're just getting very creative with our verbiage, right? So like even now, like with residency programs, like we're like a part of like that committee, right? So can't say like we're actively looking for DEI, but I'm gonna make sure that you have an active involvement in people who are like underrepresented. I can still say that word, right? So I don't, as of right now, everything's tentative. Who knows in this day and age? I'm living this just with you guys. Trust me, I have to turn these off there. Put my phone down. As of right now, it doesn't seem like the DEI portion right now is going to be taken too seriously, like in practical terms, because we all know the data is very clear. We need diversity. We absolutely need diversity in not just medical students, but in leadership. We have to. Like that's this whole talk, and this is all about women, right? But we absolutely need it. Like we all know, there's plenty of evidence to back that up. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because we also have evidence to back that up. So we know that's just good healthcare. We're just again getting creative verbiage. Could some of this change and our hands be tied? Who knows, right? Like it sucks to say that we're in a very uncertain environment, but as of right now, I will say that the sentiment is still the same. That we absolutely value DEI and want and are actively for that in medical school. Things that I think jeopardize it is not so much our wanting to find it, it's more so financial. I would say the loan cap is the challenge here, right? So with the BBB, right? So what they effectively passed was that they're going to cap student loans for graduate school at like 200,000. So if you do like a master's degree or anything like that's included into the cap of like your medical school loans. So what's that effectively going to do? It's just going to make a bunch of rich people go into medical school. I think that would be one of, and like severely like hinder people from underrepresented backgrounds to be able to go to medical school. So I think that's honestly probably the biggest hurdle as opposed to us like actively looking for it. I try to tell myself he's not a king and things can change. Again, day to day, guys. But I try to tell myself that a couple of years, all of this could change. So let's try to be honest. I'm living this life with you guys, I promise. But I hope that answers that. It's more the federal loan issue and the loan cap that worries me more about DEI initiatives, more so than just like strip away DEI, because all of us very much want diversity in medical school and in leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Yeah. Cool. Feel free to reach out to me. I like give out my email address. I'm perfectly fine with that. Again, I'm an open book and happy to talk anytime. Well, thanks for having me.
Our very own MRAS sticker.
Oh, you're so sweet. Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right, one more round of applause for Dr. Thank you so much.
I'll see you in the ED.
Bye. Oh yeah, we'll see you in the. Okay, that was very nice. I think we did that. Okay, well, besides that, I think that's all we have for you guys, besides bonfire on the side. And then, does anyone else have any more for sexual training? Well, I'll just text on the side.
Audrey, Monica, and Ethan. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Anything else? Who's doing summer session 2? Okay.
Wait, what?
Any meeting conflicts?
What's the?
No.
what's-
I just said who's starting summer session 2.
Oh,
Oh, not you?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
you are? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, good luck, guys. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. It's 5:11, so if anyone needs to head out, feel free to. If not, Cords will stay around and hang out, chill for a bit. If you guys want to hang out. But it's very good to see you guys again. We'll see you next week. Also, Plumwood. Next week is Plumwood. Yay. Bye, guys. Have a great day.
Right.